Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the void, mostly about books. I am doing Criminal's Read What You Own challenge, where I have had my husband pick out 100 books from our bookshelf that I hopefully haven't read, wrap them all in, given them all a number, and then I am using this jar to pick out numbers with the books that I am reading. So, I have now just finished Stealing the Mona Lisa, What Art Stops Us from Seeing by Darian Leader. And this book came out in 2002, which means it just barely fits into another challenge I'm doing, which is Alma's Journey Through Time. Now, she has given us two challenges, and that is to read a book from each decade, from 1910s up to 2020, and a book from each century, from the 21st century down to the 12th century. So for January, we were going to read a book from the 21st century, or 1910, and being published in 2002, this fits to our 21st century. Now, this book by Darian Leader starts with him talking about when the Mona Lisa was stolen, which happened in 1911. So it happened quite a long time ago, and you have some illustrations of that event. And what happened was that he went into the Louvre and just took the painting, and it was gone for several decades. But what they noticed after the Mona Lisa was stolen was that there were so many people who traveled to the Louvre to look at the spot on the wall where the Mona Lisa had been. So they were gathering around to look at an empty wall that used to be covered by the Mona Lisa. So Darian Leader's project in this book is trying to speculate or philosophize around what could be the reason for people being interested in looking at a blank wall. Darian Leader is from a psychoanalytical background. This book was bought by my husband. He also works within the psychoanalytical theories in his job, so that's why we have a lot of books referring to psychoanalytical theory. And one of the things that Darian Leader talks about when it comes to why it's interesting to look at an empty wall is something that's called sublimation. Now, sublimation is quite a large theory within psychoanalysis, and what they're talking about is that children are traumatized from a young age by just existing. Sort of the more theoretical aspect of it is that it is a combination of how when we need to separate from our primary caregivers, that is a traumatic experience. In addition to the fact that we then learn language, which will never be completely fulfilled, because language will always be lacking to what we actually want the words to mean. And so to sort of cover up all of these lackness, all of this trauma that we are living in simply by existing, we do something that's called sublimation. And sublimation is just actions that cover up all of this lacking. And therefore, sublimation can be doing drugs, drinking, exercising, anything that sort of takes our mind away and cover up all of those nasty things that we don't really want to talk about in our subconscious. And one of the things then Darian Leader sort of theorizes about is, does this sort of explain why people want to look at a blank wall? Because art is then, of course, a form of sublimation. We look at art to cover up for all of this lacking in our society. And that is also why something is art and other things isn't. Because by calling it art, it really receives the sublimation, while something that looks similar but isn't actually doing that sublimation job will not then be considered art. And because sublimation is about avoiding the emptiness of life, when the art then is taken away from us, we can replace sublimation of looking at the art by then looking at the lack of art, the emptiness that is suddenly revealed by Mona Lisa having vanished. So that's sort of what he talks about within the book. And I really enjoyed it because I use a lot of philosophy in my own work. I've now started looking into the philosophy around art as it is used in, for example, kindergartens and schools. So having this way of understanding, or one way of understanding art as a form of sublimation, is an interesting way to sort of grow that knowledge base. But what I started thinking a lot about during the entire book was actually social media. Because what he talks about is, because art is sublimation, art is then defined by the space that it occupies, both physically but also mentally. And that made me think about social media, and especially book talk, and issues that we are discussing regarding book talk. Because book talk then becomes the space that maybe defines a form of sublimation. Now, I'm not necessarily going to say that sublimation is a thing or isn't a thing, but I do think that the idea that we do things to cover up or to want to attract aspects and sort of lackness, things we are lacking in our own life, is a good way of understanding what is a good way of understanding what psychoanalysis call drive. And drive is, well, what drives us, what motivates us. Why do we choose action A over action B? And by thinking about how our drive is influenced by the space that drive is given space, that sounded like a form of circle argument, but what I mean is that there are physical or social spaces or areas where certain actions are given permission to exist. And because they're given permission to exist, it influences us differently than doing the same action in a different place. And that's what I mean with what's interesting and what I started to think about when it comes to book talk. now we are in 2025, and there are a lot of trends about things we need to leave behind in 2024. And one thing I see come up again and again and again are cartoon covers for romance books, mainly romance books with a lot of smut in them. And you have then the sort of two sides of the discussion, with one side being, we need to take care of each other, please think of the children. And the other side is, where are the parents? And it made me think a lot about a situation I found myself in. So I have a friend of the family they're married and they have their own children, and they are not readers. They have to spend the majority of their time and energy with working, ensuring that there's food on the table, that there is a roof over their heads, that the kids have clothes on their back, and then try to ensure their children's emotional well-being. So reading is a luxury for them. They haven't grown up with parents who taught them to read, the cultural aspect of reading, but they do live in a society that keeps telling them that reading is positive, reading is good, that they should encourage their children to read. Because if you read, and if you're good at reading, you will succeed in life. And their oldest was now very interested in book talk and had bought some books that she and her friends wanted to read. And these friends were over the moon. They felt they had succeeded. While they did not know about these books, they did know that books are good. That's the culture we live in. And then we went to visit them, and I realized that this 12-year-old girl was reading Colin Hoover. I asked her, oh, what did you think about it? And she almost started to cry, because her 12-year-old mind wasn't really ready to understand the things that were going on in a Colin Hoover book, because Colin Hoover writes about things for adults. So maybe if you are 15, 16, 17, you could read it, no problem. 12-year-olds, kind of young. And so this is sort of an example of why the argument, where are the parents, is kind of elitist. Because how were my family friends supposed to understand what they were buying for her when they themselves aren't readers? They don't have the energy to read these books beforehand. That's probably why they never encouraged their children to read directly, because they had no references on how to do that. They could, of course, deny her to read. No, you're not allowed to read because I cannot ensure that what you read is safe. But society says that that's a bad thing, that we should encourage children to be readers. So there is a sort of a lack of understanding that reading requires a lot of cultural capital in understanding what is appropriate for children, having the ability and energy to read quite big books. If you are not, Colin Hoover, it's not the biggest book, but if you do not read, if you're using all of your energy working and surviving, that becomes a lot of energy that you're sort of not really getting back. In addition to sort of the baggage that I don't think we really talking enough about regarding books on social media that reading has a lot of cultural baggage, with being something that everyone says is good and important, but still very fraught. And I'm not really saying that because down with cartoon covers, because Colin Hoover doesn't really have cartoon covers, even though she does have this sort of simple, anonymous kind of covers in a sense. But it does show a lack of understanding when I hear the argument, where are the parents? Because not all parents can be readers for their children. And the alternative would then be us as a society saying it's not important to be readers. And that's the sort of cultural shift that we need to do. Because what is happening now with social media is that we've created a space where reading has become attractive, where reading has become a much larger tool for sublimation, for our drives, for our motivations. But social media is still a space where a lot of, everyone exists at the same time, at the same area. Which sort of shows that I would never have gotten this girl to become a reader, because the space that I occupy in her life does not introduce her for the idea of reading the same way that TikTok, and then BookTok as an aspect of TikTok, allows her to do, and what makes her want to do it. And so you cannot really say just where are the parents, because of social media, a lot of children are now in spaces where the parents don't have the cultural capital to truly navigate them safely. Australia is now saying that the tech companies, to be able to exist in Australia, need to ensure that 12-year-olds aren't alone on TikTok. We'll see where that lands, if they will find a way to actually ensure that 12-year-olds aren't on TikTok anymore. But the question, more than just where are the parents, will then have to be, considering that not everyone will have parents, what will then the ethical responsibility for those who share this space be for one another? And I don't think there is an easy answer for that, mainly because social media is an international phenomenon. You have people from South Africa, from the US, from Britain, from France, from Russia, from Australia, from Papua New Guinea. And these are different cultures with different views of the world and different spaces from their culture, where they talk about different ways that we interact and different spaces that the space we have created should be. He doesn't talk about any of this. just to ensure, he just talks about how the art gallery is creating a space for sublimation through art. I'm the one who started questioning if social media and what we promote and don't promote in social media is equal and has a similar process through that. Please let me know what you think. Please let me know if you've read this book, if you agree with anything of what I said. And we need to pick the next book. So I am doing my handy little jar, not sponsored, just used and reused, and I'll pick, and it's 83. I don't think I actually did. I just hold up 83 on. No, it's 85. I thought I held up 80 earlier. So 85, 84, 83. So I have no idea what books are picked because this is my husband's doing. But I do know I had some ideas because he did pick it from our bookshelves, and I do notice, oh, that book's not on our bookshelf anymore. But this is, I'm translating from for this, so this is at least a Norwegian version of the book, The Best Song. And it's edited by Harriet Carolinius. And this book is simply 19 different authors who write about their favorite song. So you would then have, I assume that then this is an essay collection where different authors, these are different Norwegian authors who then write about what different sort of pop songs have meant for them in their life. So, for example, have Stig Sæterbakken. He is a famous author who talks about Heart and Soul by Joy Division. And we have Jon Jesper is a very famous crime author. He talks about his favorite song being Perfect Skin by Lloyd Coyle and the Commissions. And the title of his chapter is Perfect Skin. Because the song is called Perfect Skin. So not all of them have sort of the same one. And Vigdis Hjorth is also a very famous author. Anything Goes, Taking a Chance on Love by Duke and the Orchestra. So this is going to be a fun read, I hope. Having different authors telling about how important different songs have been for them, I assume. I'm going to read it and let you know. And thank you for listening to me screaming into the void.